In 2025, there are now more versions of World of Warcraft than there has ever been on offer before. From Modern WoW, Classic, temporary game modes and other types of servers, there is a lot to choose from. Today I'm going to talk about every version of WoW we currently have, and I'll be going over the following: what the main options are, how to play them, how far progressed they are for their expansion, what is expected to happen next for each version, and when will be the next big thing happening as well. Not all of these will apply to each version we'll cover, but I'll let you know what the deal is as we talk about each one. So by the end of this, you'll have a good idea if there's anything out there that catches your interest, or perhaps there's a way of playing WoW which you didn't even know of. So with all that said, let's make a start. Let's begin with the most recently released version of WoW, a new temporary game mode called Legion Remix. This is World of Warcraft's second remix event after the first one took place in Mists of Pandaria. In fact, it only felt like Legion Remix was announced pretty recently, so for it to already be out is kind of surprising. Anyways, Remix is revisiting an old expansion on a super sped up timeline where you get to blast through all the available content from that particular expansion. It's not to be confused with classic releases of old expansions either, as in Classic the idea is recreating all the items, quests, the class design, the bosses and so on as they existed during any given expansion. In Remix you're still going to be using retail characters with retail class balance, abilities and so on, but you're just doing it in a Legion appropriate world. The main attractions here are to get a look at how the world of Legion played, either as a new player to this well-loved expansion, or somebody wanting to go back and check it out again. There are updated versions of artifact weapons so you can experience how they played and can use their most powerful abilities, Legion appropriate Mythic Plus affixes, you can experience the Legion dungeons and raids, there are new and returning cosmetic rewards that can be bought via a Remix specific currency called Bronze, and there is also a heroic mode for the open world where enemies gain a ton of extra power and certain affixes to give some challenge back to open world content where typically it's been seen as super easy for a very long time now. Honestly, I can see this open world heroic mode going down as the biggest win for Legion Remix and it being integrated into the game in some way, which makes Remix such a good testing ground for new features. To make a character on Legion Remix, log in via the live part of the Battle.net launcher where the War Within currently is, and there'll be a button to create a time runner and then you can play from there. These time runner characters will level at an accelerated pace, will gain power super fast, and they can be transferred over to the live game at any point 24 hours after their creation. At the end of Legion Remix, all characters will also be transferred to Modern WoW as well. Legion Remix is still very fresh, only having released on October 7th, and it will run until January 19th, 2026. So plenty of time left if you want to go back to the Broken Isles and revisit Legion once again. Before we go on, a quick word from today's sponsor, Boo.dev. Boo.dev is a platform dedicated to teaching back-end web development from start to finish in the Python, Go and SQL programming languages. Where it sets itself apart is that Boot doesn't want you staring at endless boring pages, so they've designed this learning experience as though it's an RPG where you're in charge of the pace at which the action happens. It has features you're going to be pretty familiar with, such as daily goals, achievements and leaderboards. And above all, Boot.dev wants to get you hands-on writing your own code, understanding how projects are built, and gaining insight into the world of programming. There's plenty of help available on your learning journey too. Boot has an AI tool to help you understand what you're learning via asking questions about your problem, rather than just handing you the answers outright if you are stuck. But as you progress, you will unlock pages in your spellbook, which is a bit of a cheat sheet of notes and links to refer back to for help as well. And Boot believes in getting a solid understanding of the fundamentals, and taking your time is key in this field of work. And if it does prove to be something for you, it is well paid with experience and often has remote working opportunities too. So if it sounds good, why not give them a go? You can go to Boot.dev and try out their courses for free, and then use my code Willie to get 25% off your entire first year should you choose the annual plan. Many thanks to Boot.dev for the sponsor today. Let's get on back to WoW. Next, let's talk modern World of Warcraft. So the War Within is getting towards the end of its expansion cycle. As Blizzard mentioned when they kicked off the whole World Soul Saga trilogy of the War Within, Midnight and the Last Titan, these expansions were always planned to run on a shorter time frame compared to how WoW would normally operate. Patch 11.2 The Ghost of Koresh was mentioned as the last major content update to the War Within, and that came out at the start of August this year. Legion Remix, similar to what Mists of Pandaria Remix Remix have been seems to be an end of expansion event to keep players invested whilst the new expansion's features are being finished up. In fact, Mr. Pandaria Remix ended on August 20th, 2024, and The War Within released about 1 week later on August 26th, 2024. So whilst it's not been officially announced yet, it wouldn't be unreasonable to expect Midnight to release around January 26th, 2026, given that Legion Remix ends on the 19th of January. So it's not too late to see The War Within, I suppose, but don't really expect anything major that's new either. We really are at that point where it's just a waiting game for the next expansion, and in the meantime you can take part in usual WoW activities such as raiding, PvP collection, the story, all of that. A big and successful new feature in The War Within were delves. These are solo dungeons, though they can be run with multiple players too. They offer a more solo or casual friendly way to play the game for people wanting to learn a new spec with less time on their hands, or who just can't always commit to finding a group at a certain time. Blizzard also spoke to the success of delves in a recent interview as well, saying they really achieved their goal of offering a new way to play for more casual or time-limited players. And judging from this, I think we can expect delves to become a standard expansion feature. I'm going to talk a bit about the next expansion, Midnight, here too, since Blizzard is going pretty wild with changes to the game, and the changes they're making are really trying to remove a lot of the confusion and difficulty in getting set up and playing modern WoW. So Blizzard say, we're updating every class specialization with an eye towards approachability by reducing complexity and making gameplay more intuitive, as well as we are also reviewing the amount of concentration or cognitive load required to play each spec. Cognitive load encompasses tasks such as keeping track of active auras, passing conditions to choose the most effective ability in any given moment, or remembering long sequences of abilities. The last time this happened was with the Great Pruning, and that was in Warlords of Draenor, and I'm going to be honest, it didn't go down all that well back then, because at the end of the day this will involve simplifying or in many cases removing buttons for a bunch of specs within the game. For what it's worth, I think the majority of retail specs do feel quite overwhelming to try and understand at anything beyond a basic level, and I really hope for Blizzard in Midnight, when they dial things back, they can keep what makes each spec feel special. Blizzard have already introduced a one-button rotation manager in the game as well, and that can be used in place of using your abilities manually, albeit it incurs a longer GCD than doing things the normal way. On top of that, Blizzard are also cracking down on add-on usage to track combat performance or access combat-related game data. That means in-combat tracking for cooldowns, abilities, procs, and so on will be completely gone. So DBM won't have boss timers anymore, weak auras won't be able to organize how you deal with mechanics, and you can't track your opponent's cooldowns in PvP. This represents one of the largest changes to the endgame in World of Warcraft's history, and it really can't be understated how important it is for Blizzard to get this right, alongside them simplifying a lot of classes. Blizzard will be introducing their own in-game trackers for cooldowns and rotations and so on, and will aim to make encounters sufficiently intuitive through their visual and mechanical design, and these changes could all be coming as soon as the pre-patch. I think at this point lowering the barrier to entry for endgame is always going to get a mixed reply. Top players have had their add-ons as crutches for so many years now, while so many other players would have never got over that initial hurdle of feeling as though their character is properly set up for endgame when it came to understanding your abilities, your rotation, and all the add-ons you need. It's going to be interesting either way, and also you have to think WoW is totally coming to console at some point in time. You just know all of these changes make way too much sense for it not to happen, but that's still quite far off in the future. The other big feature for Midnight is of course player housing, allowing you to live the ultimate fantasy of home ownership in Azeroth. This is a feature that's been in discussion since before vanilla even existed, and it should be a great addition for all levels of players within the game, and you can also access player housing from December 2nd if you've pre-ordered as well. But that's just about all the big information to cover on modern World of Warcraft. Let's go back a bit and talk Classic. We'll begin with the Anniversary Realms. These are a new set of fresh vanilla realms that released to commemorate 20 years of World of Warcraft in November of 2024. These are now quite far progressed, and Phase 6 and Naxxramas just dropped on October 2nd. This will be the final major content patch for these realms. You can play these via the WoW Live Classic part of the Battle.net launcher, and then go into Anniversary Realms from the tab on the bottom of the page when you log in. These realms offer a no changes approach, more or less, to the original Classic Classic WoW experience. So if you want just basic Classic, Anniversary is going to be a good option with a lively endgame and a decent leveling scene. What I will say is that time is against you for playing these realms for more than a few months in a vanilla setting though. So the final patch is out, and it has already been confirmed that these realms will progress onto TBC afterwards. Now we don't know exactly when this will be happening. There was a roadmap some time ago which just said winter or spring, and that doesn't really narrow it down too much. What I will say is that TBC originally released on the 16th of January 2007, and Blizzard could treat this re-release as a bit of an anniversary double whammy by having it drop on the same date in 2026, or at least close to that date. And Blizzard has done Classic and Modern releases pretty close to one another before, by the way, but even for them this might be a bit too close between where Midnight's looking as though it's going to drop and this being the potential release date for TBC. If I had to guess, it's probably going to be around late February or early March for TBC, including about 3 to 4 weeks of pre-patch as well. We also don't know if Blizzard will allow character transfers to Classic Era. I'll talk more about what Classic Era is in a moment, be those paid or free at the end of Anniversary Vanilla. I'd expect that they would allow them in one way or another, but again we just don't know yet. Seeing as Anniversary is progressive, I'm also expecting these realms to progress to Wrath of the Lich King at some point in time, and for that to be announced at BlizzCon 2026, but again we just don't know if that will happen. Also, we don't know if there will be TBC Era realms at the end of TBC Anniversary either. That's a lot of I don't know, but I'm just assuming questions people will have here, and unfortunately that's the answer at the moment. You should also know that there are no GDKP allowed on Anniversary realms either. Next in the Classic rotation is our current Classic expansion, Mists of Pandaria. So progressive realms are up to MoP at the moment, featuring monks, Pandaren, and a revisit to this expansion's features, class designs, raids, all of that good stuff. The expansion is still pretty early on, and seeing as both Throne of Thunder and Siege of Orgrimmar aren't out yet, many would say that its best points haven't even happened yet, so it's still a solid time to start if you wanted to see how Pandaria was back then. To play Mists of Pandaria, it's located under the live Classic part of the Battle.net launcher here. Mists of Pandaria Classic had Phase 2 release on September 23rd. That's the Landfall patch, which introduced some new factions, PvP events, Brawlers Guild, and it progressed the legendary quest line. In Phase 1 there was of course the new PvP season, challenge modes, as well as the 3 opening raid tiers and Mogashan Vaults, Heart of Fear, and Terrace of Endless Spring. This does mean the next major content patch for Mists of Pandaria will be the Throne of Thunder. This should be one of the big heavy hitter raids that people are really waiting to play in this version of the game. Given the current content cadence for MoP, I'd expect Throne of Thunder to come sometime around late November, maybe even early December. Though saying that, Phase 2 doesn't really have as much content as Phase 1 did in terms of raids, so maybe they speed through things a bit more than that. Beyond that, for Mists of Pandaria, Phase 3 will be Escalation, advancing the storyline, legendary questline, new scenarios and so on, and finally Phase 4 will be Siege of Orgrimmar. What happens after Mists of Pandaria is anyone's guess at the moment. The logical step would be Warlords of Draenor Classic, which I really can't believe I'm saying. You know, years ago people started to really push for Classic during the run-up to WoD. The "you think you do but you don't" quote was from a pre-WoD BlizzCon panel. Something about history repeating itself here maybe. I don't know. Either way, for the time being, Mists of Pandaria has plenty of time left, so it's an option if you want to check it out. Next is something to touch on real quick before the final versions of WoW, and that is what Blizzard is currently working on for the future of Classic. They've mentioned plenty of times that they're currently building something entirely new for the Classic space, and many people interpret this to be Classic Plus. The idea behind Classic Plus is a separate and persistent timeline for Classic that builds on the original game without going the way of expansions. Given that there's no BlizzCon this year, we aren't expecting any official announcement for what this project may be for some time, but know that Blizzard are up to something, and it very well could just be the next step for Classic WoW to take it beyond just being re-releases. This is by far the biggest question mark in the video, but I wanted to let you know where it's at. It's not much to go off of at the moment, but hopefully it is something we see one day. Last, we have a few other types of realms to quickly mention. First is Classic Era. You can find this via logging in through the live Classic part of the Battle.net launcher, and then finding Classic Era at the bottom of the page. These are copies of realms from when Classic originally moved to TBC in 2020. They're frozen on Phase 6 of Classic WoW and have been in this state for years, so all the content is out and there are people of all gear levels in the game. This really was just a museum piece that was designed to keep original vanilla there as we move to TBC, but it's seen a steady population of vanilla enjoyers go there over the years. Given the certainty that it will not move to TBC, if you just want pure vanilla 100%, then this is the place to go, albeit there won't be as much of a leveling scene there as there will be on Anniversary. There really is no rush or FOMO here, seeing as though nothing's changed for years, so it's always going to be an option to go back to. Also, you can GDKP here unlike Anniversary, so that might be the difference maker for you. Next is Hardcore WoW. Again, this is under the Live Classic part of the Battle.net launcher, and then after logging in you can see which servers are hardcore under server types on either Classic Era or Anniversary. There really are very few differences between the two. Anniversary realms were progressive, but all the content's out now, so that doesn't really matter anymore, but Anniversary does have dual specialization, whereas Era does not. The essence of Hardcore WoW is vanilla, but with one life, and this restriction makes the game into a way more authentic MMO experience in many ways, because there's so much less rushing to endgame to raid, and way more taking your time and forming bonds within the game. And if you die, you can transfer to regular Era or Anniversary realms depending which Hardcore realm you are playing on. Hardcore's player base is comparatively smaller, but it's very dedicated, and it can be a little tricky to gauge how active servers really are due to a complete lack of data from endgame activities that we typically rely on. As far as I know, Anniversary realms do have more players for Hardcore generally speaking, but both options should be fine enough, as at the end of the day, Hardcore is mainly about the leveling journey. Also, in case you're wondering, will Anniversary Hardcore realms progress to TBC? We don't know that either. I think it would be cool, to be honest, but I can't say I'd be too enthusiastic about doing 1 to 58 on what would be just easier than base vanilla before getting to Outland. Last but not least is Season of Discovery, Blizzard's second seasonal realm for Classic WoW. It came out all the way back in November of 2023, and as of May this year, Blizzard have confirmed essentially that they've stopped development of it. Season of Discovery featured massive class updates, tier sets, quests, raids and more. Following the blue post that they're going to be stopping development, the population has rather expectedly fallen off a cliff, and now it is the least played version of Classic out there. Blizzard also said prior to stopping development work that they would be keeping Season of Discovery around, but I don't know if a heavily customized version of WoW can expect a second wind, similar to what Classic Era was able to pull off. Saying that, it's still playable of course, so you can log in and experience all the changes, pick up all the new abilities easily and so on, but don't expect there to be a massive player base or too many raids running. With the player base size, you would absolutely need a guild and be able to commit to a dedicated raid time to be part of the niche remaining community. With Season of Discovery, it was a great experience, but people were really playing it because it was providing a future for the game, and as soon as Blizzard stopped providing that, people stopped playing it. The next custom thing in the vanilla space is hopefully Classic Plus, but as talked about earlier, that still seems to be quite far off. But either way, Season of Discovery is still open, and if you're curious, you can still give it a go. And that is it. That was 8 different versions of World of Warcraft that exist in 2025, as well as some information around each of them, so you can decide if any sound right for you. Let me know which versions of WoW you're playing at the moment, and what you're waiting for in the WoW space in the comments down below. Shout out once again to boot.dev for sponsoring this video. You can check them out for free via the links below, and get started on back-end web development today. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.